It's so weird in a Arctic circumstances to have to speak English, but we found it best to do so. But we're clever anyway, all of us. You four represent so much knowledge, and we have two writers, Sigbjørn and Pivinnguaq. We have two scholars, and I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm a translator from Icelandic, so I have my Arctic connections. I don't know what we should talk about with so much knowledge in the panel, but I had thought that we'd talk about myth, but that'll come up anyway. I think we're going to talk about looking back. I think looking back will be the theme for today, because Sigbjørn, your novel is situated in 2084 and 2000, some 100 years after, 100 years after.
Yeah.
And you Bodhi, you're deconstructing the concept of future. You try to make us think about future in another way. And you, Marta, you're into decolonizing the mind. And what about you? What is your relation to the past? I think of the brilliant short story that was published in 20-tal about an ice monster.
Mm-hmm.
That comes to visit a child and his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a very special irony in it, because the monster exists, but it's also a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand the story right, it will come back. It melts, but it will come back.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think there's something in this story. There's something. There's a view of history. Would you agree, or could you say something about that?
Well, few years ago, when I was doing some field work in archaeology in Greenland, I was staying in southern Greenland for almost a month, and then I did some archaeological surveys for almost a month as well in northern Greenland, which covers the shoreline very much, like in great distances, and that's where I started to notice that the landscapes have changed so dramatically within a year, and that's where I kind of got the idea: how am I going to tell a story that could reach, including children, so they can have the same message that we are facing at the moment.
So it's a fable about the climate threat.
Yeah.
But it also has something very archaic about it. It sounds like a folk tale.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, I wrote it like a long poem in a way, because it should be rhyming. So when I imagine that a parent is going to read this book to someone maybe at night, right? And that's where I kind of have the idea that it should be children friendly, family friendly would be the best one. But with that covers the importance of the message concerning about climate change, because I have experienced it ever since I was a kid. You know, I was born in the second northernmost town, and then I've experienced about the changes. It's on the news. It's on our pretty much faces every day. So how am I going to approach this wide theme? So that's where the idea came for the book. And the narrator is actually the lunar deity the moon card, Pivinnguaq.
Okay.
So it kind of covers the cultural and identity in a way that you can recognize it when you are a Greenlandic reader.
Okay, so the future is present in form of a threat, but it actualizes also memories of the past.
Yeah, yeah.
Bodhi, tell us something about the future. I mean, I translated one of your essays for Sjugutal, and you really twisted my mind because you have you're anchored in your thought is anchored in a future that is yet to come, and that changes the perspective of everything we believe. Is that true?
I think the future is kind of complicated in the sense that it's not yet here in, if we are thinking in a very linear sense about the future, and we are counting, our calendar months and days and so on into the future, right? So that's one way of thinking about the future, in which case we can say, well, the future isn't here yet, right? And when one does that, then one also starts to think in terms of the mechanics of control. For example, can we direct our thinking in the present in such a way as to have a concrete effect on the future, right? This is what we think of when we talk about scenarios, we talk about planning, most governments, politicians. That's how the temporal structure of the future as future works. But philosophically, it really depends on how we look at time. And to a certain extent, I would say, for example, when talking about climate change, a lot of the futures that we think about at a distance or at a remove are already here now and being experienced in different parts of the world in different ways. So there's different ways of talking about this, but one interesting way that I often think of, because a lot of our work in CoFutures deals with futures from the global south. It deals with futures from some of the most climate-stressed environments, where we can, see the impact of climate change on an everyday level. And the scenarios of planning and government projects and so on, the way they distance time and the way they distance something that is to come, that which is to come is already somewhere else. For the longest time, we have been thinking about the future in the sense that, technological progress, for example, global north or a lot of the richer parts of the world, these are ahead in time. There's a certain progress structure. We have progressed beyond some of those other places because they haven't progressed enough. And then suddenly you're like, goodness, those are the futures that are coming.
Yeah.
Right? So it messes up the time structure of planning, of prognosis, and all of that. So the global south is the future that awaits the global north. We just haven't gotten around to thinking that way yet.
So global knowledge, knowledge about what's going on globally, shows us the future,
Yes.
while we're stuck in a more narrow day-to-day political thinking. Marta, you work in another direction with decolonizing, but you are also connected to thinking about the climate threat. So I think decolonizing is it's both a revision of our ways of thinking about history and the world, but you also have a future aspect in this.
Firstly, Marta, it's all very close, but Marta, you know.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
In Norway, it's also very close, so people call me. Anyway, yes. So the colonial aspect of the future. I became interested in the resonances of how people are imagining futures from around the world, like what similarities, what kind of mechanisms are on repeat. And a lot of what I found, at least in the places that I looked at, is that coloniality as a process is being sort of grappled with in many ways. For instance, in this book, I would say, where the meeting of cultures and the operations of power is something that a lot of artists and writers are pointing to as the reason for non-advancement. Not necessarily progression in the way that we usually think of it, but non-advancement.
What do you mean non-advancement?
I mean to build better systems that operate for the betterment of all rather than a few. There is a certain set of values and a way of thinking about the non-human world and a way of thinking about other human beings that is hindering us from getting there. Even though we know how to build these systems, we know how to do it, we would be able to solve world hunger at any moment if we wanted to. But we don't want to, and these mechanisms are in the way. So a lot of the people that are spending a lot of time thinking about the future, these artists and writers, I think they're very engaged in how to attack these mechanisms or how to rethink them, the systematic aspects of it, so that we can sort of make it, we can sort of advance as the humankind.
Do you think that writers and artists are futurologists willingly, or do they have this purpose, or do you trace it in their works?
I definitely think so, and I also think it's a bit of a hopeful act to create fiction in itself, even though it's like it might be the most horrific apocalyptic text. It's still in a way a hopeful act to create something because it shows a willingness for bettering, for changing the world. Yeah.
Because many mainstream future descriptions are very dystopic. But you find hope. You find alternatives and hopes everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean the question is, what is dystopia, right? Because the dystopia we see in Hollywood movies, science fiction movies, is a lot of African realities today. The main characters end up living what is just a normal life for many. You saw this in Day Zero in South Africa, when Cape Town ran out of water, and they were interviewing a family about what it was like to experience this, and they said, "Oh, it's horrible. We have to walk now miles for water." And then they interviewed another family, and then they were like, "Well, nothing's changed. It's just like life has always been here."
Yeah.
So in the same city, in the same area, people are living very different realities, and this kind of goes back to what Bodhi was saying, and this concept of co-evilness that he.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
Sigbjørn, you situate your novel in a concrete future. Yeah. But you're looking back on our time also. What was your choice?
For this novel, Fugl or Bird is well, I don't know how detailed I'm going to explain the thinking, but the idea for the novel was to write something about, and it has to do with history, as you say. It is in a way also a mirror of the colonial history of the Sámi people in some way, or it can be read like that at least. It's not necessarily crystal clear like that, but I've given the reader the possibility to read that. If the person knows the Sámi history, you can read kind of concrete things into the happenings of that book. But the thing I wanted to write about when I started to write that book was to write a book about landscape or nature perspectives, and it comes from actually started with an kind of an irritation on these days one says maybe the colonial view of the landscape, but it started with the irritation of this priest in the 1600s who's considered the father of North Norwegian writing. North Norwegian literature. I mean, he gave birth to North Norwegian literature. He was a priest living in the south of North Norway, and is considered the father of North Norwegian literature, who's created the kind of North Norwegian landscape perspective in a way, and that's always irritated me because there is a perspective there, you know, how do you say that? Before that priest, you know, before that there were plenty of perspectives, but his perspective has always been elevated into the kind of original North Norwegian perspective on the landscape. So I wanted to write a book that challenged that. I wanted to write a book in a way that had landscape perspectives as a main theme, where the landscape is the main character. But when I started to try to write about landscape in the present, or somehow in our time, it felt it made less and less sense to try to write about landscape in our time, because landscape in our time is something that is changing so fast. As we've talked about, that the future is kind of becoming the past very very quickly. If you understand what I mean, the landscape is and the climate is changing so fast that the landscape that the people who live close to nature understood 20 years ago isn't a landscape we have. You know, it's not the landscape you understand today, because it's changed. Climate has changed the premises for living in that landscape. So I tried to draft, you know, the first bit of this novel many times in different ways, and then it struck me, you know, the only way I can do it is to write what's that in English, metaphorically? Or
allegory?
Yeah, allegorically maybe, into to write an allegoric landscape that somehow mirrors our landscape of today, but also the landscape of the past, because the present landscape is changing so fast that, you know, it's not going to be the present anymore. So might as well just push it into the future and write about the future landscape that's fictional, to say something relevant about the landscape that we are having today, or the way landscape is reshaping us as human beings today. Also in the Arctic and in the south, particularly maybe now, but we also see it, of course, other places more and more. And you know, anyone with a news channel can see that things are changing dramatically. Not only in the far north and the far south, but everywhere. So the story here is that they land on a planet with a landscape that they can't decipher. That's the kind of main idea, and that's what we're facing more and more. I mean, people who used to be able to decipher landscape, you know, people who live closer to the landscape, reindeer herders. If you, for instance, can't decipher the landscape like they did before, because the landscape or climate is changing the ways you have to deal with the landscape so fast that you can't decipher it anymore, and that's what's happening in the book in a way, and it's going to just accelerate more and more. That's my view. So it's going to be our situation, not.
Yes, but you have another relation to the landscape as being an archaeologist. But so you see you investigate the past through findings, and but you also experience the brutal climate change. And that's a driving force for you.
Oh yeah.
While writing also.
I mean, it breaks my heart when I see like ancient artifacts or even animal bones that are protruding out from the cliff that is new because of the erosion towards the sea. So we are losing those kind of items that are quite historically important to us. Culturally, it is also giving. Historically, obviously, so they are disappearing just like that, as if it's not going to exist anymore. It's kind of breaks my heart when I think about it, because I have seen it face to face on what's going on. And the history books even that we are studying, like I have my master's degree in cultural and social history back home in Nuuk, and the excavations, the textbooks through the excavations are very little, and most of them are through archaeological surveys. So if you compare them, there's like I might be mistaken, but it's something that I remember. It has I think only 2% of them, 2% of the findings of the surveyed areas have been excavated. So from the little percentage, that's where we have all these books about the history, right? About archaeology in Greenland. I might be mistaken, but it's something that has kept me. That has kept my mind going with the information that my former teacher has told me.
So there is so much left to learn.
Yes, yes, still. And I remember though, every time I excavate, you would find something new, something unique, something you haven't seen before from our history books. So it's always exciting, but it's also, as I told you, it breaks my heart when I see erosions or even landslides all over Greenland, where the permafrost landscape is thawing very fast, but it's also changing into something else. Like, I'm not used to trees. I'm from the second northernmost town, and I remember when I was in southern Greenland, I was at the airport, and when I went outside, what's that long thing? And then I didn't know that there were trees in Greenland. And now the permafrost area is thawing, it's melting, and the trees are blossoming also. So it's changing the landscape dramatically in some ways that I'm not so used to. Yeah.
I was just thinking about Grace Dillon from the U.S., who's written about the end of the world, and she's writing something like everything that is all of indigenous futurism is post-apocalyptic, because the apocalypse was the colonial moment there. So it's all post-apocalypse. And you could almost apply that here as like writing mid-apocalypse, like a world is ending in a way. A cultural, historical world is ending with the melting. So do you think that's kind of the feeling that most people are kind of walking around with, that it's like this is the end of something, or a new beginning of something, or?
Well, I live in Nuuk now. The way I see it, it doesn't affect the way I'm living now as much as people in northern Greenland. For example, my family or friends who are fishermen or hunters, and they do tell me that they are affected in one way or another. because the animal migrations are also changing, and so it's kind of affect the whole environment. And it also, I mean, settlements are also, villages around Greenland are also closing due to that. The most recent one was few years ago. There was a huge landslide that kind of destroyed the village. There were houses in the sea. There were pictures online already. Also, there was a family who passed away due to the tragedy that happened. So it's happening right now. Yeah, it's devastating.
Marta, could you say that history is a multitude of apocalypses?
Do you want to say that?
No, I just interpreted your point that so too many people have suffered. They already suffered a kind of apocalypse, and now we're looking for it in the future.
Yeah, you could say that, I guess. I mean, it's all these processes of worlding, of making worlds, of place making is something I think that all humans do. But with the changing landscapes, I think it becomes difficult to know how to do that, because the things that we have perceived as constant, the mountains and the rivers and the lakes, they're not constant. They're not reliable anymore. So how are we supposed to do our placemaking? And I think that's so interesting in food, because one of the things there is that people can't talk anymore. The sun is making a loud sound, so that there's this noise, so that the people can't talk to each other anymore. And I thought that's kind of, for me, that kind of resonated with that idea that we're losing the ability to shape the world, to make a world for ourselves, to understand and be in place.
And a world is then something something local. We're talking about the world seeing the globe, but every life form is a part of a local, also a part of a local world.
Yeah.
And these local worlds have been annihilated during history. But I want to ask you something. You say in one essay that there's no such thing as science fiction.
That's not me, actually. That's Mark Bold and Cheryl Wynn's famous essay. There's no such thing as science fiction. I mean, the argument there is, of course, much more technical and market-oriented. That, well, what we call science fiction is something that the market constructs. It's the marketplace of editors, of readers, translators, people who, build what we read, and people who read them, so how we read those. So in that sense, there is no such thing as science fiction, because there is so much slippage, and what we consider science in one period might not be science in another, for example, or what some readers might consider science fiction in one space might not be the same in another. And this is also true in a way of the kind of work that I do. And when I talk about Kalpavigyan, for instance, which is the Bengali word for science fiction, I mean, it's not really the Bengali word for science fiction, is it? Right?
What does it mean etymologically?
Kalpavigyan, the word itself means okay, let me put it this way. It means the transformation of knowledge across time. So it's unpacked in all its etymological beauty. That's what it means. But it could also be something as simple as, an editor trying to find an equivalent for the word science fiction in the language, which was kind of the case for Odrish Bardhan, who coined the term. In fact, his argument was like, science fiction is not really that good a term. We should reverse that and say fiction science, right? And emphasize the fiction part of it rather than the science part of it. And therefore, kalpa or kalpana came before Vigyan, which is science, right? So that's like an editorial decision. So what we think of as science fiction or as speculative literature, a lot of it is constructed by the readers and by the editors and so on. I mean, writers often are like, how do I tell this story best? Right?
Yeah.
And then if a reader comes along and says, hey, I see science fiction here, the writer will be like, okay.
Okay, you're welcome. But isn't transformation of experience over time, isn't that a good definition of literature? Generally,
Most certainly.
writers transform our experience and make us connect with the neglected parts of our own experience, or and puts us in contact with the global circumstances. So it's sad to boil this down to a genre, a Western genre, isn't it?
I agree.
Mm.
I'm a translator myself,
Mm.
so in fact, my most recent book is a translation of stories from late 19th, early 20th century. So, so the beauty of individual words, yeah, they can take you far.
Yes. But I'd like to dwell a little bit more on science fiction. Do you place yourself within science, picking an invented world in the future for as your starting point? Do you place yourself within science fiction?
No, I've never been interested in writing. I've never been a big reader of what is defined as science fiction, at least apart from, I've read, Martinson's Aniara. You've always read something that's defined as science fiction. But as I explained for this project, I kind of, the future became the solution for
the necessary point of view.
Yeah, in a way to say what I wanted to say in the most efficient way. So I've never oriented myself towards science fiction as such. But during the work with the novel, I familiarized myself further with other parts of the genre than the mainstream one, and also stumbled upon what Marta mentioned, indigenous futurism, which is defined by Grace Dillon that you mentioned, and is not a very set genre, but a very very interesting kind of genre to work within as a writer. So I have been doing things I think about as maybe some kind of indigenous futurist writing after this novel, but I don't think this kind of fits the bill necessarily for the indigenous futurist genre. Well, maybe it does, but the kind of collapse of linearity, for instance, is an interesting trait of the indigenous futurist genre that is exciting as a writer to try to challenge in writing, and that I also as in a way recognize from childhood stories and stuff like that, because I don't know, that's how people used to tell stories. It's like the snowman in your or Iceman in your story, maybe, whereas where the distant past kind of coexists in a way with the present, and somehow becomes a kind of a future, maybe, because of the possibility of or the allegorical shadows that you cast into the future by the melting of and so on and so on. So it's interesting, but I've never been a science fiction geek as such, no. And I'm publishing a new novel in January, and that's couldn't be defined as science fiction. So I'm back on a different note.
Yes, humans are always storytellers everywhere, and the impact of science fiction on popular culture I think of it. I think it can be compared to myths from all time. So the thought of a forthcoming collapsed nothing is something that we tell to each other in order to cope with something that is something in this that we're living right now that is more difficult to grasp and understand because our thinking is rather narrow and day to day. So, what do you say about science fiction as a myth of our time?
Perhaps I can go first. I think what needs to be detached really is the hold that the idea of science fiction has over the future. I think people are talking about the future everywhere, constantly, in different literary forms, in myth, in folklore, in children's literature, call it what you will. Like it's all over the place. People are talking about the future. Science fiction is just one very specific defined field in which people talk about the future in a certain way, perhaps. And even that is defined, as I was saying, by editors and by publishers. Categorization of books in a library, for example. But that's by no means the only way of talking about the future. And in a way, indigenous futurisms, Grace Dillon's term, and so many other futurisms that we deal with and talk about, they are in a way exploding this idea of the future. They're taking away the future, the hold that the future has and science fiction has on the future, and just saying, well, you want to talk about the future. The future is a figure that is interesting, that allows us to do certain things in our literary form. We don't have to necessarily be invested in science fiction or in a very technologized version of the future, right? So it's more a space of play.
Isn't even talking about the future in the singular, isn't that very monolithic?
Exactly.
And the practices that we all represent is a way of exploding this monolith, and showing, making literature and art showing that there are there's plenty of forms of life, and most of them have been eroded. Most of them are no longer.
And new ones are coming into being too.
You're hopeful.
One has to live with something.
I can say something about. Can I?
Yeah.
About because it was interesting what you started to when you started to speak about the local perspective, that you need to kind of puzzle together a global understanding, and I think that's one of the challenges we face today. That the local perspective, or the ability to be in dialogue with your own surroundings is something that is getting more and more rare all over the world, because we're being urbanized into, or a too big part of us are being urbanized, centralized, and areas where people used to be in dialogue with the landscape, as such, and have their livelihood directly connected to the landscape, are getting more and more rare. I mean, I sit here, talking about science fiction. So it's a perspective that's getting more and more rare. Also among the indigenous people, because we're getting centralized. We're getting, we get our professions become something else than being part of our surroundings. And it changes, of course, perspective. It changes language in a paradoxical way, because I often think about one of the things that I used to kind of enhance about Sami language is the precision in describing nature. There's an enormous precision in describing snow and ice, as in Greenlandic, you know, we say we have 400 words and even more, you know, about saying different, you know, detailed on how the snow works, how it clings to a tree, how, you know, all kinds of stuff you can say with different words. But and I'm also, you know, how long is that going to be relevant? Is it going to be relevant for my grandchildren, if I get grandchildren to even talk about snow? Are they going to have snow?
It's a knowledge connected to a practice, and the practice is
well, it's disappearing in a way.
Disappearing.
Yeah, or you know, the natural phenomenon might be disappearing. I don't know if we're going to have snow in northern Norway in 100 years. Maybe not.
Our time is running out, but I'd like to give Marta the last word.
Oh,
because I see you're thinking something.
yeah, I'm always thinking something. I don't know how good it is, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, this has started a lot of thoughts in me. My last thought was that if we take away the science fiction label, like Bodhi said, it becomes, you open up for all these imaginings of futures that are not necessarily marked as such. So in my thesis writing, just kind of slithered into religious texts, or what is marked often as religious texts, or fairy tales, or things like that, and talk about it in the Norwegian context as undringslitteratur, which has become very popular now, based on people are kind of digging up the old stories and the old folketro.
Undring, what's that?
Wonder.
Wondrous literature.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is the same in Swedish.
No, we don't have. It's a good word. We buy it.
You buy it. Great. Yeah. Yeah.
Förundringslitteratur.
Because these things are emerging again in our literature, and I think that is also something that I found in Nigeria, for instance, where they're looking at the old gods and how are they living in these urban environments and this times of crisis. So they're still with us, and there is hope in that. I think. I don't think as long as there's people, there's going to be new imaginings of new futures.
No, new wonders.
New wonders. Always new wonders.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
For this chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.